Hello, welcome to Radiant Guidance. I am here in Taos. I've been traveling in my TKT, the Timekeeper's Temple, and I happened to stumble upon Jordan here. We're at his tarot table in downtown Taos. He is a fellow Sagittarian, Capricorn moon. We discovered a lot of synchronicities upon meeting, actually, in addition to our love of the poetic breath of nature, these archetypal tools, specifically astrology, but he actually has his own tarot deck and does tarot readings here. And yeah, today I just wanted to chat, ask you how you got into your journey from being an architect to an in the field of architecture of well-being. Um, yeah, so
Well,
you want to share?
I'll start a little earlier than that even, because what happened is I think the things we're most attuned to are often so natural. And, like if I'm brushing my teeth, I'm not going to stare at myself in the mirror. I'm not that concerned with myself. I'm not that concerned with myself. And so what happens is I think sometimes things like divinity, etc., are so big and so there, we can't see them. So we're born with natural talents that we develop into abilities. Some of those I think just develop side by side with our lives. Hence, so big, so there. We don't notice them. When I was 7, my mom went to the grocery store, and precocious little me saw her Rider-Waite Smith up on her desk and said, "What are those picture cards? They must be important because she's always taking notes." Well, I didn't know about reading. She came home from the store. I had all the cards out on the floor. She handed me the booklet. And I went, no, their cards are telling me stories. Well, that moment came and went and was kind of lost on me until when I published the deck, my mom said, "No, don't you remember? The cards were telling you stories." So before I published my deck, I took 3 years off to forget everything I had ever learned. Because to me, it's about your natural tarot voice. And honestly, now I look at tarot and astrology. I can look up in a tree and see Mary Cassatt's face, or Degas. They're out having a picnic, or Einstein's crazy hair. Well, there's art in nature. So I look down at the tarot cards and at the sacred geometry and astrology charts, and I see our inner nature in the art. And that to me goes to the notion of symbols. Symbols are always generative. Every time I see a symbol, I'll get a different take on it. And my short story on that is I can never swim the same river twice. The river has moved on, and I have changed. But tomorrow, it still will be my favorite river, and I'm still me. So in a sense, there's almost a monogamous relationship with those things you love, where tomorrow, it's not a 24-hour renewable. It's not controlling, it's navigating. So I now am very much more attuned to the verbs people use, because they live in the synapses, in the abysses, in the space between. And with the cards too, if I take 2 neurons, there's this electrical charge, this little baby leap of faith in every single neural connection. So what's the big deal when we take a huge leap of faith in life? Well, the problem is, if you move at all, you might bang the whole dynamism into a wall. So there's a sequencing I find with what resonates rather than what's right or wrong or sense or nonsense. So coming up to the present of 2014, I had my own architecture firm for 12 years. I had been an architect for 30 years. And on one Friday, I was doing accounting, file administration, and invoicing. And I realized that my tarot sessions had kept my architectural firm's doors open for 2 quarters, 6 full months.
How?
Like by funding.
Oh, okay.
Just by total income. And what's interesting is friends of mine said, "You're so detail oriented. How did you not notice?" And I said, "Well, my interest in Jungian depth psychology and astrology and tarot, poetry, art, painting, gardening, they don't have to pull their weight. They're all requisite in my life. So they push and pull, and I navigate how they rest and relieve each other. So when I'm not doing one, it's either out on vacation or filling up." And so what I realized that Friday is I was in a milestone in the moment. comfortable with the not knowing, but I had no WTF idea what was happening. So I poured a glass of wine and went and sat in the garden and vowed I will not say anything until Monday. I walked into the office on Monday and I looked down at my shoes, which was rare. Because honestly, I'd already put them on. So, and go figure, I tie my own. So I'm walking into the office, but I look at my shoes, but I noticed that I looked at my shoes. So I backed out of them, stepped over them into my office. So there's a grounding quality into my business, as it were, as if the business was my earth, my world. And I went, oh, on Friday, it was about the success of my career. Now, what am I in service to? And that's where I didn't fall too far from my own architectural tree. That's where the architectural well-being came from. And so instead of going and getting a PhD in psychology and thinking you have to go back to school, and I needed no more degrees. Because to me, validation is just for parking. There's a point where you just have to live your life, your way. And I think what happened at that point, I was 42. Most people say midlife crisis. To me, that's the time
you're in this opposition.
You're in this opposition, but also Neptune square natal. So to me, Neptune boundarylessness, not no boundaries, that would be a problem. But boundarylessness, the expansive. What happens is Neptune doesn't see itself. At the square, Neptune goes, oh, hey, oh, it gets a mirror. And so I think when Neptune self-sees, it understands its own expansiveness and the power of limits, and also then limitlessness, but none of that makes it vague. And what I find is to embrace that whole notion in this simple little poetry is I saw a 1-hour documentary called The Life of Fire about a particular island volcano. No people, it's uninhabited other than animals and botany, flora, fauna. Well, they realized that the octopus and the octopi survived, but the fish populations kind of ebbed and flowed. 30 seconds before any eruption, the octopi went out to like 384 feet, some like specific number. All the octopi knew that no rock blowing out of that caldera in their history had ever traveled that far. So they were safe. But the hot rocks coming through the water would steam fish and animals and crush them. And basically, it was like a sushi den. And the octopus, seared sushi. Yeah, it's like sashimi or whatever that would be. And it comes back in, and the octopi would come back in and just feast. What they did is they started looking at how they do that. The fish could hear at 5 kilohertz. The octopus had 4. So it was not human hearing levels. But what happens exactly almost to the nanosecond, 30 seconds before an eruption, there was a 4 hertz whoop, and the octopus, they had 30 seconds just to hang out, swim out a little further. So with that, there was this connection to self and environment of all those octopi. What I find is then they said, the volcano, its head resides continually in the clouds. Its hands and feet make new lands here, with the magma turning to lava, and its feet firmly planted in the abyss. Which to me makes Nietzsche's, if you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze back. That's a beautiful quote. It's one of my favorite ones. But my joke with it is, sure. But if you gaze too long, the totality of the existential nothingness of said abyss will lean forward and say it's really rude to stare. So that's really where tarot came around to the architectural well-being, and back where I started, sometimes what we're most in service to, what we would while away hours as a kid, that's what we should be doing as a job.
I agree 100%.
And a lot of people get caught in the, well, I'll do that when.
Mm-hmm.
And my analogy or my example is seeing a 93-year-old woman who was like kind of like Iris Apfel, over the top fashion.
Make sure this is on. I don't know if this is on. I can't tell. I think it
Is it working?
I think so. I can't tell. Usually it lights up.
Well, we can do it all over again.
Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
So I think what's interesting in that grocery store line, this woman is 93, I think she was. It's like Iris Apfel, over the top fashion. She's like, I don't care. She wears what she wears. But this little girl goes up to her and she goes, I really like your hair. Well, it was deep purple. So it's not a librarian purple hair mistake for gray hair trying to whiten it. She meant that purple. And you could tell she probably had red and yellow and other things at different times. But the little girl says, when I get old, I want to be like you. And she said, you got to start now. I didn't do this because I got permission. I did this, it took decades of eccentricity practice, of just being myself. And being yourself is not eccentric to you, it's just eccentric to other people. And to me, my whole life, not a democracy. The only people who get a choice is me. So going from plural to singular, like kind of almost bad grammar there. But then the people around me, they may make comments, people I'm close to, suggestions, third person. If I respect them, I'll listen. Doesn't mean I'll do anything. But at the same time, it reminds me then of your perspective on your own work. Molly, if you tell me one thing and you mean another, and I like you, that's ironic. It's irony. But if you tell me one thing and mean another, and I don't like you, you're a liar. So, things, I think we have to notice the subtle nuances of how things change in intense big ways like that. So in that sense, all of that comes to, do I resonate with you? And it's okay to lean forward and say, I don't believe you. Because sometimes people are actually just so used to embellishing something. It's not so much a lie. It's completely untrue, but they're not finding any interest in their lives. So they're trying to spruce it up. Carnival, spruce it up. Well, so they're embellishing, but the problem is they get so far away from what is actually present that they lose sight of who they are. And when someone says, who are you? Did you find yourself? I'll always say, absolutely not. I have 5 words for that. Always complete, never finished, lifelong. I don't need to know who I am. I need to know how I resonate. And in that sense, it's like a gemstone. A friend of mine makes, Deneen Tomeko makes gem waters. She has a wonderful custom set she makes for each individual. And then there are focus formulas that go through love, manifestation, abundance, prosperity, KNOW, know for intuition. And what it is I think the notion, the way I see it, is we are each a gemstone. So we need to index off the inner facets. But gemstones, if you say, who are you? They're not even going to respond. You have to look it up. You're an aquamarine, you're an emerald, you're a ruby, or you're a pyroclastic flow, or some kind of composite. But back to even like, I don't clear my cards. Nature does not erase its strata. Or as you said earlier, finding an arrowhead. How cool is that? So I think going all the way around several spirals there, from starting when I was very young, the visual language was my mother tongue. A big part of why I didn't notice, well, it's visual. So what am I going to say? What am I going to say? Nothing. So how is that a real job? I'm not going to say it's not. But that, I think, visual acuity or mastery, when you come back around to it, you have a radar or bat dar. You kind of see with cat's ears. You know, a cat will be looking at you, the ear goes over here. There's a whole IMAX movie going on over here, and they didn't get distracted. What I find, though, is people like to use ego and egomaniacal. Well, egomaniacal is bad. Ego is just the shape of your identity. Ego's strength is solid and positive, and it shows your boundaries. Self-centered is awesome because it's not conceited. It means myself, I have a center. So if you can take their self-centered, you say it negatively, and okay, it's pejorative. It's bad. It's negative. But if you say it positively, it's I honor the fact that, wow, you're who you are indefatigably. So if that goes all the way around to kind of overly word out a response to your question to start.
Funny because that lady's holding an octopus, and a woman walked by with a I bike PHL shirt, and we both lived in Philly, so I'm just paying attention to the
Yeah.
landscape around us that
Well, there's the art of
invites,
nature.
yeah, it's inviting these synchronicities. And I guess to me, a tool like tarot is a mirror of perhaps something, an inner knowing we already have. So when we pull a card, it's not searching for something outside of ourselves, just like astrology isn't searching for an answer outside ourselves, but it's illuminating or bringing us into a greater awareness of things we already know.
Yes. And I think also in things that, pardon cutting you off there, things we already know, but we may not have verbalized. So I think there are deep knowings where, like intuition, reasons are always unreasonable. If you have a reason, that's wishful thinking. I win the lottery, buy that island. Well, there's no resistance. But Pisces, fish, a lot of clients that are so water in their chart, so much water. They're always, I went to this grounding retreat and it didn't work. I'm like, because you don't ground on the earth. Fish ground into the pressure of the current. So it's like you mentioned earlier, you're going with a flow, and I do that. And I also advise people, it's like be fluid, but don't go with the flow. That's peer pressure, and only dead fish go with the flow. So I think to enliven your life back, sometimes I find the pressure, it's not strain. Stress is just a force applied. The fish applying itself to the current. And the pressure contains me, consolidates my energies. Just like gasoline in a gas tank, and I turn the key and go vroom, vroom. So I think it's a matter of how we deal with the stresses. The stresses, to me, are free influences in life. You don't need to react. Do I respond? How do I respond? And honestly, too, when things get really intense, if there's someone else is, basically emanating a storm, listen deeply. That's important to them. And 100% of the time, even if they're putting it on you, you know it's not. They probably didn't inside also do. The weather's going to wash through. The weather always washes through. And I find that if you're alive, you are batting 1,100% of always getting through every problem you have. So, you stick in there and do what you know is healthy, and don't smoke hope. It's a narcotic. Eternal hope is that those inner embers to me. So I think that kind of goes into even like, transformation, things through life where, don't smoke the narcotic of hope. Utilize hope as an ember that can keep your fire burning.
I see.
And notice the PHL, notice the octopus. So what happened is, just like a chart, you put this session between us in context. So in that sense, people say transcend your chart. I say you can't. The reality is, though, you can live your chart in context. The transcending is a trickster. It's actually not, I'm going to do this and now I know all the answers. I was an architect for 30 years. So, no, the geometry is a project and it's complete, it's built, and next. So as transits go, your transits are coming, complete, built. How do you integrate them next? So keeping it in context. So I think just even the simple deceptive simplicity, if you notice in the octopus, and then the PHL with Philly. Because I think what happens is then you put us in a place even larger than the table, the microphone, and the screen. So I think what's interesting there is you, in a sense, not in a sense, you actually did um, transcend the session in the chart as an idea by noticing things around. So in that sense, you get astrological guidance from your astrologer, and then cherry pick. How are you going to integrate that? And as Carl Jung said, don't take any diagnosis that you didn't first give yourself.
Mm.
And
Mm.
he also said, I'm so glad I'm Carl Jung, so I don't have to be a Jungian. So, so he was very, very self-reflective. And he had trouble with feelings. He was a thinker. So he took hard roads into what is the alchemy? What is the gemstone, crystalline lattice structure of who I am?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes back to astrology. At any given time, you can look down and, oh, well, how is this a gemstone? Instead of sacred geometry, which can be two-dimensional, look at it like the Egyptians, where it was volume, faceted in context.
And I think the transits, it's like they're putting a flashlight through different facets, and different people, different relationships emphasize some of those facets differently.
And there's transits, to me, I sometimes call yellow car syndrome. I went to buy a car one year, and my insurance was too high on another one because, well, I'm male and there's a demographic, and it's just there it goes. Well, instead of a sports car, I'm going to get something smaller, less expensive. Well, I walk in the dealership. There's this little daffodil, sunflower yellow, Euro trash looking Chevy Aveo. I had to have it. I didn't care what it was. It was yellow. Well, I honestly don't know if I'd seen a yellow car. And on the way there, I'm certain I didn't see any yellow cars. I got the car. Driving home, in the 20-minute drive, I saw at least 35 or 40 yellow cars. What happens is, like a transit, I wasn't tuned to be able to see yellow cars. So say it's like now, I have Pluto crossing my ascendant. That's going to be doing that for a little while. It's a nice glacially slow movement. It's a wonderful time because there's full life breathing in that. And it's not a big upset tower moment. It's continual life where Pluto, I find, Pluto is all about established sovereign identity. It goes as slow as it wants, somewhat elliptical, and it's changed through life rather than, oh, Pluto's on my this, everything's going to go to heck. Not necessarily. Now, if you use your own power of suggestion, you can make it do that. And that's on you. So again, back to your transits, how are you able to see something differently? How can you see familiar things of interest to you differently? So I find with transits, instead of lapse, where, oh, I've done this again, where the only way I can get out of it is, oh, here's the same situation. That's the universe saying, are you still a dumbass?
It reminds me of the expression, the only one who gets to decide the meaning of something is us.
Yes.
So how we perceive a transit, like we can approach it with fear, or we can approach it through an empowered lens of awareness. And to me, the whole exercise of looking at these things is not to freak ourselves out, but to empower ourselves with that extra layer of awareness.
Yes.
And decide what meaning we want to ascribe that thing. Just like I had a friend, I was looking at her chart, she had Neptune coming into conjunction with her sun in her 6th house, and she's like, an astrologer told me I'm going to have a near-death experience. I'm like, or you could be tapping into a lot of creativity and psychic power and spiritual energy.
Yeah.
So,
well, because she was going into the oh no crisis mongering of the other shoe's going to drop. And here's the thing: people get into this where they hold their breath and stop because waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something good's happening, so something bad must be coming.
We're designed to look for fear as humans. It's like, look at the news. Like, we're designed to think of every possible thing that could go wrong to protect ourselves.
Yeah, it keeps you alive. But I also think that then we hunt and we eat and all those things, and what's interesting to me is that how do you actionably stay alive? So there's survival there, but what I like more is thrival.
Mm-hmm.
How do you actionably pursue your interests and things that nourish you? Food, people, I mean, that kind of thing. Not people like vampire, but how you connect with someone where that enhances both people. And in a sense, there's the embers that are enlivened when thrival. And so instead of this, I come around and, oh, the universe, are you still a dumbass? I get an opportunity to try again. Well, if I'm not failing or making mistakes, I'm not doing anything. But if I get off the 2D here and come to the spiral, I can look down at that point or down on that point, and I can see a familiar thing differently, that planetary or asteroid transit gives me a freshened perspective, a new ally of vision. So how is my clarity of vision renewed in with transits instead of the, oh shit, this is going to happen?
I like that.
And I think what's interesting with the other shoe dropping, people waiting, I think that started in the late 19th century when apartment living started. Because what happened is someone on a different schedule or shift than you would come home and they kick off a shoe. So you're literally waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That's where the expression comes from.
I think so. But what's my joke though is people got stuck sometimes probably if someone had a peg leg. Because they walk in, they kick off the shoe, and they'll be waiting for an hour and a half for the other shoe to drop. The other person only had one leg. They only had one shoe. So it was never going to happen. So I think we can get lost in that freeze. And instead of fight, flight, freeze, I laugh, the amygdala, the alligator part of our brain, primal, fight, flight, freeze, all those things. Those aren't the only things. Those are reactions. That's your radar saying, not you're in danger necessarily. It's saying, be aware of the octopus in the PHL. Be aware of your surroundings so that you are staying safe. Because what happens there to me, in that point, at that time, you have the opportunity to say, oh, my amygdala, I'm a little anxious, or I'm a little terrified, or, oh, joy just entered, something. But what happens is I don't call it the amygdala. It's not AMYGDALA anymore. I call it that bitch Amy. And she's not in your best interest half the time if you're always reactive. So I think, she, and that takes me to, the amygdala is such an old part of the brain, right? Reptilian. So I'll add to that my definition of tradition. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people, and they don't get a vote.
I like that.
So,
well, do you mind if I show one of your cards? Like, pick one for the moment?
Please do.
To show the viewers this deck. Tarot in the Land of Mysterium.
Yes.
What did I get? I got the Four of Cups here.
Nice.
Just to show you some of the art. It's very geometrically stylized. Yeah, it kind of has like a 80s feel to me. Is that when you made these?
I made them, actually, no, I made them in 2005 to 2008.
They have a bit of that like retro new wave vibe.
There's that, and also French Defiche poster art, which just has just forms and no shade and shadow.
Gotcha.
So from the 30s. Art Nouveau, that, and a little less detailed than Nouveau, but it has the same kind of compositional resolve with curves coming back into curves. And it's interesting too, you pulled a volcano.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the volcano.
So
I was just looking.
Look at the treasure that comes out of the trouble. So that's a concept I use of don't waste trouble. Look at the treasure in the trouble, because what happens is, look at those other three cups in the water. Those are established treasures. Cups is a psychological function of feeling. Mm-hmm. As opposed to emotion. I always say, don't let your emotions dictate how you feel. Emotions are washing through. Your psyche doesn't turn off. Sometimes they're not yours. So I let, like just the wind today, it's going to wash through. I don't control the weather. Nature doesn't control the weather. It just has weather. So there's zero intent. So I think with this card, it's beautiful that this came up because of that there's some treasure in the trouble. But look at all the noxious, cool, pretty lavender smoke coming out. Well, it's probably not safe. So sometimes you got to let that wash through, so you don't just willy-nilly dive in, but you see the treasure, so you approach and connect with the treasure. And I think the treasure lives in the trouble.
So when this card comes up in our reading, how do you typically interpret it?
In context, so with each person differently. But a general piece here would be, look at your established feelings, what you know to be true, the trinity of you. In Egyptology, the number 1 is a symbol. It doesn't have a quantity 1. It has a value of 3, because every unity is a trinity that's an identity. So the all of me is also my sacred generative, some people call it sacred feminine, and the sacred formative, or sacred masculine. And then those two together, all of me. So those 3, to me, are representative of the identity of how you naturally feel. And then that cup coming up could be like the transit we just talked about. How is that feeling? How does that make you feel? Give you an opportunity to enhance the thrival in your life.
So you could get washed away by the emotion, or you could ride that wave.
Ride the wave, or dive in, or just simply immerse, or observe and participate and connect with it. You don't have to take it on, but in a sense it's a dance. So you're having a feeling experience, not thinking. So you don't necessarily need words. And you don't necessarily need to know how you feel in words, but does it make you ooky? Is there something in your gut? Or is it, wow, joy enters? That's birthday cake to a 4-year-old, kind of thing. Or bacon, kind of thing. So it's a kind of thing where I would typically read that 4 of Cups as there's an opportunity in your life that has come, but it's coming and going like a transit. It's temporary. Did the volcano just erp it up and it dropped? You better get it quick, because it's going to melt back into the magma. Or did it blow it sky high and you can just watch it and learn it? Like Pluto transit. There's going to be a whole experiential watching and learning while I'm also doing. I'm not going to pause. And that's the thing, like Mercury retrograde now. Till the 25th, so we got a couple.
And you had Pluto on your moon like me, so we discovered his moon is 2 degrees away from my moon, and so you had that Pluto moon transit not that long ago.
Yeah, and it was and it's now moving. It's on my ascendant and my 2-degree Aquarius Mars, so that my moon was 22. So it's the kind of thing where that's a great example with, that's going to be another huge cycle.
And it's such a big cycle, especially with Pluto, that it's almost like I don't want to say you get used to it, but like with transits, a lot of the time, these longer transits, it's just
milestone in the moment and a new phase of life starts.
Yeah.
So to me, to kind of segue into the words you're playing with that concept, to me what happens, milestone in the moment, a new era or phase of life starts. The Fool card in the tarot, the Tower.
People get scared of that one.
They do. They're the oh shit cards. That with the Devil and the Death and 3 of Swords. And I'll deal with the 3 of Swords in a second. But what's interesting there is I don't start over from scratch. No one is no one installed a handle on your carpet and is yanking it from their feet. It's starting over, not from scratch, from experience. What happens is now, how do you see familiar things differently? And you're given an opportunity to groove and track your life more naturally with this ally, with this influence, malevolent or not. It doesn't matter. They say keep, friends close and enemies closer. I always wonder, what the heck does that, how does that work? Well, you don't have a trust relationship with your enemies. They probably hate you. Actually, they probably don't think about you at all, unless they're going to attack. So I realized distrust, betrayal, hurt, comes from within, someone you trust. you're close to, not from your enemies. What happens is if you keep your enemies close, they don't like you very much. So when they part like the Red Sea, incoming, what happens then, you can deal with the incoming, or you can let it happen and know that's theirs. And you don't have to feel bad about it. That's their process. You can let them come, betray, get fired, move on. But you don't have to deal with it that way because that's their stuff. So I think what happens is like with malefic planets, look at how they are both friend and enemy or frenemy. Mm-hmm. Because they will open in a way where there's that cup coming out of the volcano.
Our enemies are our greatest teachers.
Yes, because they're dispassionate. They are going to act their way. And they've also watched you maybe even more than you have. So in a sense, Pallas Athena, Minerva, she's the ultimate strategist, Pallas, that asteroid. Mm-hmm. She makes Mars' little boy Warrington disease look like he's playing tiddlywinks to her 3-level chess. You know, she's the Queen of Swords.
Because it's defeat through the mind. It's not through brute force.
Right, organized and clear thinking. So
one step ahead.
Yeah, and like in pool, like in chess, you're not playing here. You're playing. People say 3 moves ahead. That's kind of vague because you almost don't know, or you can. But I think playing the 3 moves ahead to me is almost metaphorical for saying I'm playing in the context of what's coming forward or what I'm going to bring forward. How do I contribute to that chess match or that, and I won't contribute to a chess match other than I'm going to lose that chess match because I get really aggressive and know 2 or 3 moves and then the other person knows what they're doing and checkmate. And I'm like, oh, great game. We don't need to play that again. We want to play some tiddlywinks. More of a game of chance. So, but you're right. Then that coming in gives us an opportunity, I think.
As a sidewalk oracle here, just encountering people in real time and space and, offering these tools, what is one of the most common questions, inquiries, let's say, that people come to you with?
It's interesting because it's a trick, kind of a trick question in a way, or a trick response. I don't start with questions. I have people hold their intents and their questions, and we take a road trip. Because I find on road trips, the wheels are turning, the mind gets going. We don't belabor our decisions. That tree's cool, turn left. Okay.
Love it.
And we go through a serendipity. What I find, though, in that is your priorities, in a nuanced way, kind of safe crack, more clear. You connect to them. So I have people hold their priorities and their questions until we get going. And sometimes a new question will come in. And usually it's more of a sanctuary of a question for us to not answer the question, but enter the question and explore the question. Kind of like Luke Skywalker going in the dark cave and to go through the rite of passage. Because then what happens is they have self-induced something they're connected with now in context. I laugh though, one of the heckler questions, it's like, oh, should I get my fortune told? And I always say I'm not a fortune teller. If I was, I would be sitting on one of my many islands now, handing out Powerball tickets and scholarships to the most deserving of individuals. Because I'm not. I can't. I can see to the horizon. And I can, in unconscious, conscious, kind of venture over the liminal horizon. There's a pulsing, I think, of how our place of creation lives in life. But I'm not going to go bet money. I just, again, that's just larger navigation. So I think in terms of questions, what I find is most of the questions are, tell me about how this works. And I'll say, well, I see art in nature, the Mary Cassatt, Degas, Einstein. So to me, it's about seeing our inner nature in the art of the cards.
Beautiful.
And so we'll go explore what they do. And at any given point, I always say I only have one rule. It's your reading. So just like a road trip, if the music sucks, you don't ask, you turn, you change it. So you roll down the window if you get hot or what have you, or turn up the air conditioner or heated seats where seasonally wherever you are. But I think then that really brings it back to the only rule is it's their reading. And I find it gives a lot of people freedom to engage more than they typically have been allowed to or allowing themselves to. It takes some of the fit, finish, and polish. I got to be pretty. I got to have the hairs in place. I got to be presentable. I have to, have impeccable grammar. I have to. You don't have to do anything. And so, what I think is the have tos to me are need based that you bid into. But if you inspect what you expect, you'll find that a lot of times expectations are just blind spots.